Umagang-umaga? Ba't nakakunot-noo ka naman agad dyan?
Grabe naman kasi itong mga nababasa ko sa Facebook. Puro tungkol politika, mga diskusyon at mga yan. Naalala ko pa noon, tuloy yung regime ng Marcos. Pati na rin ang mga kasaysayan ng People's Power Revolution.
Ay ba? Oo nga. Malapit na eleksyon, kaya siguro nangangamba, diba, na baka muli ka naman ang nakaraan. Kaya gusto nyo rin makipag-diskusyon online para na rin makapag-educate ng kapatid.
Ibang klase naman kasi ang mindset ng iba. Dapat kasi Pilipinas ang iniisip nila. Basta ako, pipili ako ng kandidato na alam ko ang mga kakayahan at nakabubuti sa bansa.
Ay, naalala ko. Ipalalabas pala yung speech ni Cory Aquino sa documentary. Marapat siguro na manood tayo para naman maintindihan din ng mga anak natin yung nangyari noon. At hindi sila bumasa sa mga videos na yan pati mga Facebook post.
Sige, magandang ideya yan.
(1986) A Cory Aquino Speech Documentary. Corazon Cory Cuanco Aquino, who functioned as the symbol for the restoration of democracy and overthrow of Marcos dictatorship in 1986. The EDSA People Power Revolution installed her in her presidency. The Philippines was put to international spotlight after overthrowing a dictator through peaceful means. And on September 18, 1986, President Aquino went to United States and took the podium, addressing her presidency and the challenges of the new republic. For more, let's watch the clip of Cory Aquino's speech for the U.S. Congress, which is an important event in the political and diplomatic history of the country, for it arguably cemented the legitimacy of the EDSA government in international arena.
The government sought to break him by indignities and terror. They locked him up in a tiny, nearly airless cell in a military camp in the north. They stripped him naked and held a threat of a sudden midnight execution over his head. Ninoy held up manfully under all of it. I barely did as well. For 43 days, the authorities would not tell me what had happened to him. This was the first time my children and I felt we had lost him.
Cory continued that when Ninoy survived that first detention, he was then charged of subversion, murder, and other crimes. Ninoy decided to do a hunger strike and fasted for 40 days. Cory treated this event as the second time that their family lost Ninoy. She said,
When that didn't work, they put him on trial for subversion, murder, and a host of another crimes before a military commission. Ninoy challenged its authority and went on a fast. If he survived it, then he felt God intended him for another fate. We had lost him again. For nothing would hold him back from his determination to see his through to the end. He stopped only when it dawned on him that the government would keep his body alive after the fast had destroyed his brain. And so, with barely any life in his body, he called off the fast on the 40th day. After then, we lost him irrevocably and more painfully than in the past. The news came to us in Boston. It had to be after the 3 happiest years of our lives together. But his death was my country's resurrection and the courage and faith by which alone they could be free again. The dictator had called him a nobody, yet 2 million people threw aside his passivity and fear and escorted him to his grave. I held fast to Ninoy's conviction that it must be the ways of democracy. I held out for participation in the 1984 election, the dictatorship cult. Even if I knew it would be rigged, I was warned by the lawyers of the opposition that I ran the grave risk of legitimizing the foregone results of elections that were clearly going to be fraudulent. But I was not fighting for lawyers, but for the people in whose intelligence I had implicit faith. By the exercise of democracy, even in dictatorship, they would be prepared for democracy when it came. And then also, it was the only way I knew by which we could measure our path, even in the terms dictated by the dictatorship. The people vindicated me in an election shamefully marked by the government, thuggery, and fraud. The opposition swept the elections, garnering a clear majority of the votes, even if they ended up, thanks to a corrupt commission on elections with barely a third of sanity in parliament. Now, I know our power.
The first parts of her speech talk about how her family lost Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. for 3 times when he was locked up in the military camp in the north on his hunger strike and fasting for 40 days, and lastly when he died. Then, she attributed Ninoy's martyrdom to the peaceful EDSA revolution. Also, she talked about her earliest initiatives as the president of the restored democracy. She emphasized the importance of the EDSA revolution in terms of being a limited revolution that respected the life of every Filipino.
Again, as we restore democracy by the ways of democracy, on are we completing the constitutional structure of our new democracy under a constitution that already gives full respect to the Bill of Rights. A jealously independent constitutional commission is completing its draft, by which will be submitted later this year to a popular referendum. When it is approved, there will be an election for both national and local positions. So, within about a year from a peaceful but national upheaval that overturned a dictatorship, we shall have returned to full constitutional government.
So, talagang focus sa peaceful way and democracy ang constitution na nabuo noon sa Cory.
Well, yan ang sabi sa speech ni Cory. So, let's focus sa pinapanood natin.
Alright mga anak, makinig kayong mabuti, okay?
Opo.
Cory then proceeded on her peace agenda with the existing communist insurgency aggravated by the dictatorial and authoritarian measure of Ferdinand Marcos. She asserted,
My predecessor set aside democracy to save it from a communist insurgency that numbered less than 500. Unhampered by respect for human rights, he went at it with hammer and tongs. By the time he fled, the insurgency had grown to more than 16,000. I think there is a lesson here to be learned about trying to stifle things within the means by which it grows.
Cory's peace agenda involves political initiatives and reintegration program to persuade insurgents to leave the countrysides and return to the mainstream society to participate in the restoration of democracy. And she stated that while peace is the priority of her presidency, she will not waver when freedom and democracy are threatened.
Finally, may I turn to the other slavery, our $26 billion foreign debt. I have said that we shall honor it, yet that means by which we shall be able to do so are kept from us. Many of the conditions imposed on the previous government that stole this debt continue to be imposed on us who never benefit from it.
Ito po ba yung sinasabing utang? Do we really have no choice? Talagang tayo ang magbabayad ng utang ng nakaraang pang administrasyon?
I don't know yet, anak. Let's just watch for now.
Whenever I went in the campaign, slum area or impoverished village, they came to me with one cry: democracy. Not food, although they clearly needed it, but democracy. Not work, although they surely wanted it, but democracy. Not money, for they gave what little they had to my campaign. They didn't expect me to work a miracle that would instantly put food into their mouth, clothes on their back, education in their children, and give them work that will put dignity in their lives. But I feel the pressing obligation to respond quickly as the leader of people so deserving of all these things.
That's very sad po. People who really craving for freedom to the point that they bid more for it rather than food or job.
Well, I commend Cory for her to feel that she has obligation, although the people doesn't expect her to work a miracle. After all, she's the president of the Philippines, so it is just right to feel obligated.
Cory then asked a rather compelling question to US Congress.
Has there been a greater test of national commitment to the ideals you hold dear that my people have gone through? You have spent many lives and much treasure to bring freedom to many lands that were reluctant to receive it. And here you have a people who want it by themselves and need only the help to preserve it.
Her speech ended as she enjoined America for turning the country as a shining testament of the two nations' commitment to freedom.
The speech mainly revolves in her family's background and her late husband's accomplishments. The ideology or principle of the new democratic government was seen on the speech. Aquino was able to draw the sharp contrast between her government and her predecessor by expressing her commitment to a democratic constitution drafted by an independent commission. She claimed that such constitution upholds and adheres to the rights and liberty of the Filipino people. The Marcos regime was mentioned. The deaths and negative acts never talks about the positive things given in our country. Also, this speech says that some people in the slum are willing to give their life in order to have a democratic country, even if they starve to death or become childless. Despite Cory's efforts to hoist herself as the exact opposite of Marcos, the speech still revealed certain parallelisms between her and the Marcos government. This is seen in terms of continuing the alliance between the Philippines and the United States, despite the known affinity between the said world superpower and Marcos. It was very noteworthy that Cory recognized the large sum of foreign debts incurred by the Marcos regime never benefited the Filipino people. Nevertheless, Cory expressed intention to pay off those debts. Unknown to many Filipinos was the fact that there was a choice of waiving the said debt because those were the debt by the dictator and not of the country. Cory's decision is an indicator of her government's intention to carry on a debt-driven economy.
That was the wholesome documentary. I would never learn about it, but I haven't watched today.
Aba, English ka bigla man. Ako rin naman may natutunan in another perspective.
So there was really a choice na hindi ako ng administrasyon ni Cory ang utang ng nakaraang remen. Why did she even express intention to pay when she herself said that the country never benefited from those? Paano kaya kung she waived those debts?
Well, we will never know, anak. Perhaps we won't suffer that much if ever those debts weren't obligated by the new republic at that time.
Patunayan lang natin na ang panahon noon ay masakit sa nangyayari sa ating sayan. Well, at the very least, nakalaya ang mga tao noon sa diktatorial na pamumulat kaya may demokrasya tayo.
That happening should be sealed to every Filipino's mind. The documentary just told us about the lesson that the president's dominant power will affect the whole nation. So, it's better to be mindful in how on choosing the best leader to make sure that who won't encounter the same fate as our fellow Filipinos.
That's very true. However, we have just heard that, respective of the next president, maybe we could have more knowledge about our history if we seek for more articles and sources that are legit.
Opo ma, maybe later na lang po. Kasi sunod na po yung favorite naming palabas.
Sure enough.
Yay! Nagsisimula na yung fun facts, events, and history.
Oo, tara na at manood na tayo.
Ang susunod na programa ay Rated G. Ito ay pwede sa lahat ng manonood.
Hello everyone! We are here again in Fun Facts, Events, and History, and for today's guest, please welcome Mr. Alfred Maccoy, who is famous for his political caricature of the American era within 1900s to 1941.
Well, that was really a fantastic book I did together with my friend Alfred. In that book, it is really obvious that we are depicting the events happening during the colonization of America, showing the cruelty of America to us Filipinos.
Yes, and it's a very artistic way of showing a commentary. Anyway, let's view Mr. Maccoy's caricature with a special twist. At dahil nga kasama natin ngayon ang special nating guest, may inihanda tayong laro na tatawaging Copy the Caricature. First, let me read the mechanics for this game so that the players would know how we'll be going to play. Ako ay may ipapakita sa mga manlalaro na imahe ng cartoon at may 10 segundo sila para tingnan ang caricature o cartoon na kanilang dapat gayahin. Bago pa man matapos ang 10 segundo, ay dapat nakapwesto na sila. Malinaw ba? Yes!
Oo.
As we all know, the pictures that I will be showing are the selected political caricatures of the American era to the political cartoons of Alfred Maccoy.
Political cartoons and caricature are rather recent form of art. It exaggerates human features and poking fun at its subjects. It became an effective tool of publicizing opinions through heavy use of symbolism and usually target persons of power and authority. This become worthy of historical examination.
O diba, hindi lang tayo mag-e-enjoy sa laro, makapupulot din ng mga aral mula sa kasaysayan ng Pilipinas. So, players, are you ready? Ready now. Let me show you the first picture. Your 10 seconds starts now.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
The first caricature was published in The Independent on May 20, 1916. It shows a politician from Tondo named Dr. Santos passing his crown to his brother-in-law, Dr. Barcelona. Meanwhile, there is a Filipino guy who is trying to stop Dr. Santos in giving the crown to Dr. Barcelona because it is not his to begin with.
Nice! Ang galing nilang manggaya, in fairness.
So, yun pala ang kahulugan ng picture na yun. Parang ito ay sumasalamin sa pagpasa ng posisyon ng isang politiko sa pamilya, kagaya ng Villaferte, na kung sa Ingles ay tinatawag itong political dynasty. Nakuha ko na.
Oo, iyon nga. That was amazing. Good job, players. Let's proceed to the next one.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
The second cartoon was drawn by Fernando Amorsolo and was aimed as a commentary to the workings of Manila Police at that period.
I think naiintindihan ko yung cartoon.
Sige, ano bang ibig sabihin yan?
Yung batang Pilipino, nagnakaw siya ng payat na manok, tapos hinuhuli siya ng police officer nang biglang may isang Pinoy na pinipigilan yung pulis kasi tinuturo niya yung grabing magnakaw, which is yung warehouse na puno ng hoarded products.
Aba, ang galing mo naman. Paano mo nalaman?
Basta, panoorin mo kasi.
The cartoons illustrated the conditions of poor Filipinos in the Philippines governed by the United States. The cartoon depicted how police authorities oppressed petty Filipino criminals while turning a blind eye on hoarders who monopolize goods in their huge warehouses.
However, when poor people robbed a very small amount of money, they can easily be jailed, while rich and powerful people who are greater thieves can't even be put to jail. How unfair.
Hay, buhay nga naman. May hirap talaga ang laging dehado.
3, 2, 1, 0.
The third caricature conveys the idea about the unprecedented cases of coloring automobiles in the streets. This commentary was published by the Philippine Free Press when fatal accidents occurred too often involving colorum vehicles. During the Imperial American influence to the Philippine society, there have been increase of motorized vehicles in the city, but the laws and policy implementation were mediocre. And this resulted to the depiction of the caricature, the increasing colorum and unlicensed vehicles around the city. The rules governing the issuance of driver's license was loose and traffic police could not be bothered by rampant violations of traffic rules. This is a direct consequence of the drastic urbanization of the Philippine society.
Tunay nga naman na kapag may modernisasyon, mayroon ding mga negatibong epekto at hindi lang puro kagaanan sa buhay.
Kung maayos naman siguro ipinapatupad ang mga batas. Hindi naman ganun ang kahulugan ng urbanisasyon, partikular na sa pagpapabuti ng transportasyon.
I agree.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
The fourth caricature depicts a cinema with a blown-up police officer that appeared to the screen saying couples aren't allowed to do such sexual behavior, like neck and making love. This illustration shows the different perspectives of people in a certain place. Youngsters uses the theater for such as making love or other doings, while the older couples are amused due to how people are different through time. Yet, in their time, theaters are commonly for watching movies, but as time passes by, youngsters commonly uses it for different reasons.
Hay, mga kabataan talaga ngayon. Hindi na ba sila nahihiya sa mga pinanggagawa nila? Parang hindi rin sila aware sa pwedeng kalabasan.
Sinabi mo pa, pati tuloy mga inosente kabataan na hindi gumagawa ng ganyan ay nadadamay.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
The next cartoon was published by The Independent on November 27, 1950. It shows Uncle Sam riding the chariot that is pulled by Filipinos wearing school uniforms. This picture mirrors our set of experiences and society. In the manner that we were colonized by different nations, explicitly rich nations made us Filipino as life. It likewise mirrors the life among rich and poor. Rich carries on with an extravagant life while the poor having a hard life, being mistreated by those individuals who are affluent or first class in our general public. Moreover, Maccoy said that the cartoons was based on an event in 1907 when William Howard Taft was brought to the Manila Pier riding a chariot pulled by the Liceo de Manila students.
Ganun pala ang nangyari noong panahon ano?
Oo nga, para silang ginagawang kalabaw sa pang-araro sa palayan. Hays.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
The last cartoon was published by Lipang Kalabaw. The cartoon depicted that the United States, represented by Uncle Sam, provided dole-outs for members of the Federalista, while the Nationalista politicians looked and waited for their turn. The essence of competing political parties to enforce choices among the voters was cancelled out. The problem continues up to the present, where politicians transfer from one party to another depending on which party was powerful in specific periods of time.
Ah, Para ito yung pagiging balimbing na politiko, ano? Ililipat sa malakas na partido like that?
Yes, unfortunately meron pa ding mga ganyan hanggang ngayon.
That was an amazing performance that absolutely suits the amazing ideas of the cartoons of Alfred Maccoy. Indeed, learnings are hanging right beside the cartoons, and because of the cartoons, awareness of the new generations unwrapped. A big thanks to you, sir, for sharing your inspiring works. That is all for today's show. See you in our next fun facts, events, and history show that surely feed you learnings.
The